Well, hello again. Yes, hello again, everybody. Welcome back to Aquarius Rising Africa. Hope you guys are wonderful and well. And it's Thursday, so we have Dr. Dennis again today. And we're going to be talking about the demonic darkness of serial killers. Man, there's got to be something so crazy about those guys. I mean, I know speaking with Australia over the years, their serial killer, prolific serial killer, Ivan Milat, I think was his name. He was actually one of the MK Ultra survivor guys. But anyway, I'd love to hear more what Dr. Dennis has to say about that. Ta-da. Dr. Dennis, how are you?
All right. It's wonderful to be here with you again.
It's
And
always wonderful to have
yeah,
you.
I hope we entertain some people for a while here with this subject. It's very interesting stuff.
I'm looking forward to it. I really am because and I know we briefly touched on this before, but yeah, I think, I don't know, I'm of the opinion that people like, these prolific serial killers, I'm sure they're part of the system. I would love to hear more about it though. So yeah, tell us about the serial killers.
Well, in the past, I think we did a show on Jack the Ripper, the most famous serial killer of all, and we talked about Rasputin, who was not actually a serial killer, but he was a very strange person. But here's the bad thing about the serial killers that we're going to talk about today, Shanty, is the fact that they can be anyone that you know. I mean, you could be a family member. They could be someone who's living a double life and you never know it. Could be a neighbor. Could be the boy that bags your groceries in the supermarket. You never know where these guys are. They're out there, though, and they're out there among us. And that's the scariest part of it all. You've got future John Wayne Gacy's out there. You've got future Ted Bundy's. Uh, the list goes on and on. And when I went into law enforcement years ago, I actually met a serial killer, but he was not a really big, prolific serial killer. I think he only killed about 3 people. But he was sort of, he fit the criteria. And he was one of the strangest people I've ever met. And I've often talked about this and the fact that um, he had a very unemotional aspect of him. He had no feeling like at all to him, like you and I would emotionally. And that was the first thing that struck me. And the darkness of his eyes was very unsettling. It was like looking into the eyes of a shark or something. I mean, there was nothing human looking back. And that got me kind of interested in this subject to a certain degree. I've always been interested. I've always been interested in criminology. That's one of the reasons why I went into law enforcement. Criminology is a fascinating subject, and it also ties into my other interests, especially the paranormal and
Right.
demonology. There's a lot of ties into that. And here's the freaky part, Chantel, and we got to remember this about serial killers. Not only can they be someone we might know, but they can be us. We are real monsters in this. We are human monsters, okay? And they're scarier than, monsters like the Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot or anything. They're kind of scarier that way. The fact that anyone can be one of these. And, inside of all of us, and they taught me this in criminology, there waits a murderer. There waits an animal that wants to be awakened. And once it's awakened, it can do some very bad things
It
to
makes a lot,
everyone, people
makes a
around you.
lot of It makes a lot of sense. Obviously, also that goes to what you're speaking of now, is which is why they would traumatize the kids, when they've got the kids, they're grooming them for the system, right? For whatever their positions might be, that they would be traumatizing the kids to the extent
A
that
lot
they
of
do it.
times, a lot of times when pain has been inflicted on someone,
Mm.
there's that propensity to want to re-inflict more pain on people, the people that hurt you, or life itself, as you look at it in general that way. That can be one thing that you come from with that. But I'm going to tell you something else that's very freaky, and we're going to talk about this today too. And I want everybody that watches the show today to keep this in mind. Obsession. Obsession opens the door many times to possession. It
Oh
is
yeah.
one of the keys. Yeah. It's a weird thing when they think about this, especially women, um, because a lot of times they're unfortunately the victims, the prey of these serial killers. But when a serial killer targets you, he begins to watch you. Yeah, he begins to watch you closely. He's almost like falling in love with you in a way, romantically speaking. He's almost doing that. He will even go to the part. Now this is weird. He will steal your trash and go through your trash to learn more about you, not just to learn where you what your habits are, but to know you more on an intimate basis. And how much more intimate can you get than your trash, right? Uh, that's pretty intimate. So he does this to crawl inside of you and to learn you more that way. He assimilates you to a certain degree. He becomes so obsessed with you. His whole world, his whole universe for a while revolves around you. This is unhealthy mental obsession, okay? And here's one thing that's interesting. I'm just going to throw this out there before we get deep into this today. A very interesting tie between serial killers and vampires, okay? The traditional vampires of folklore have an obsessive nature as well. And one of the ways you can keep vampires away from you, you can like throw rice on the floor or tie a rope with a lot of knots in it or put a broom in the room. They will stop before they attack you to count the grains of rice or to count the straws in the broom or to undo the knots in the rope. It's an obsessive nature to fix something or do something. And this is using that nature against the vampire to protect you. Okay. That's an interesting aspect of that. But if only you could do that with serial killers, you might be in a good place. But unfortunately, that probably doesn't work that well. But they have this obsessive nature. So anybody, if you ever know anyone that has an obsessive nature, I call it all. It goes beyond just mere obsession into addiction. They become people become heroin or whatever. They become you. And we're going to talk about Ed Gein today, who is actually the prototype, the inspiration for Norman Bates from, Psycho. We're going to talk about him because he is one of the most fascinating serial killers out there, and he is very dark. So I warn everybody, we're going into a very dark place today, okay? But here's the thing about the serial killer. He is lost to a certain extent. He is lost in the hallways of the human mind. There's something going wrong with this. There's something mental is snapped here. There's something is deviated from the regular course. So whatever, which way you want to put it, there's something very badly wrong in the mind of the serial killer. And this obsessive nature, this addiction to things, if you've got that kind of nature, you got to watch a person like that. Be very wary of them. Be very careful of them. Some people are married to people like that. Some people have had relationships with people like that. And it's narcissistic. It is narcissistic to a max, to a certain extent. It is very narcissistic because they're only thinking about themselves in relation to everything around you. They only care about what they want. They don't even care about you as a human being anymore. You're just something to either strike back at or to use. Yeah, that's what that goes. So we got to understand this is the very nature of what lies at the core of the serial killer. But we're going to talk also today. This is not just human evil that we're talking about. there is a certain thing, we can be we humans can be evil on an unprecedented level. We don't need any help at it. We are experts at that. But there is also something, another element here that we've got to recognize and look at, and there is something outside of this that's kind of pushing or empowering this stuff. Okay, and this is where the demonic comes in, because the demonic is very good about that. So what we're looking at here, my friends, is extreme mental illness, and the demonic gets behind that and uses it and becomes a part of that mental illness to a certain extent. This is how the demonic works, and this makes it even more doubly hard to deal with it, because you're not just dealing with outside demonic forces, you're dealing with a mental illness on the inside of this person. And so you got two fronts you got to fight. And that's incredibly hard to do when you're fighting a kind of a battle here. You've got two fronts in which to fight. You've got the demonic, you've got, and no, I'm not going to paint everything as demonic. Everything is not okay. I'm going to say everything is demonic, but it has a part in a role to play in a lot of this stuff. Okay, because you're going in a very dark area, and that is exactly where the demonic likes to operate. That's where they're best at, and you're dealing with the human mind. And here's the thing about the demonic: if when you are actually truly demonically possessed, when you have a demonic problem, whether it's oppression, possession, or warfare against it, whatever the situation, it's attacking one area. And what is that? The human mind.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he goes to overthrow. That's the I call it the heart of your castle. The soul of your being is the human mind, and that's what it's going after to attack. And if you have a weak mind or something's wrong with it, and mental illness is just an illness like anything else, okay? I mean, you can have like a heart illness or a kidney illness or diabetic or anything. Mental illness is very much like that. It is an illness, okay? And it means something has gone wrong, it's not acting right, or something is malfunctioning here, or whatever the situation. The demonic goes after that. That's your weakest spot, okay? You hear a lot about Shanty. People talk, and I think Jesse has mentioned this before too. Jesse Sabatari has talked about it. The armor of God. We talk about that a lot. Well, let me give you a warning, my friends. The armor of God has some weak spots in it that you got to watch out for when you got this armor on. And one of the main weak spots of a suit of armor that people wore back in medieval times and all that, has a very weak spot right here where the helmet and the breastplate go together. That's where you would put your arrow. That's where you could take a knight down very quickly. Okay. And to this day, being in law enforcement, we are taught to aim for these areas right here. These are your most vulnerable areas. If you have to take someone down by having to shoot them, that's the strike point, the kill point of that. But now, when you have armor, you had to recognize that was where they could get you. That's your weak spot, and we all have a weak spot, so to speak. Okay, we all have our weak spots, and the enemy, the darkness without, knows where that weak spot is. It studies you, it watches you, it understands you, and it knows where to strike at that weak spot. And this is where the serial killer comes, because the darkness, the demonic, already is what they want to propagate. They want to use it, and it's a weapon they can. It's just like we've talked about this before, Shandy, with the MK Ultra and all these things. The government knows how to weaponize everything. Okay, but even better than the government, the demonic is really good at weaponizing, because they can use emotions against you. They can use fear against you. They can use hatred and anger and jealousy against you. All the dark negative things, they can use that against you. Okay. And that includes mental illness as well. So they know where your weak spots are. And let me say this one more thing, spiritually speaking. Okay. You got to remember one thing that's very important. Inside of all of us, like I said a few minutes ago, is that monster waiting to be released. That animal that's asleep until you wake it up. And that's what the darkness on the outside wants to do. That's its main goal, is to awaken that darkness on the inside and connect with it and empower it that way. And that's what we're talking about with a serial killer, especially. And like I said, I've looked into their eyes, and looking back, my friends, what was looking back was not human anymore. It has lost its humanity, its feeling for others. As human beings, we emphasize for other people. I mean, I can feel if you come to me and you say, Dennis, I'm sick or I'm hungry or I'm cold. And I understand because I've been that way. Okay. I can equate with you. But what happens when I lose long feel for you? You're not only the relative thing here. I'm the only relative situation in this solution. Not you anymore. And this is where the serial killer goes. You're not a person, you're a thing. And they figure they can use you, abuse you, or whatever they want to do to you and not worry about it because you don't matter anymore as a human being to them. And that's a dangerous aspect. And there are a lot of people out there walking around that feel that way today. I mean, you can be lying in a subway bleeding to death and they'll step over you or they'll take pictures of you with their phone, but they don't offer to help you. What's going on here? So we all have that potential to lose that empathy, that feeling for other people. And then we become less human, And that's what the serial killer is. He's really walking around. He is a human on the outside, but what's on the inside? Darkness. The darkness is taken over. The darkness has overwhelmed the human mind. And when that happens, you have people like John Wayne Gacy, or you have Ted Bundy, listening to voices. You've got, many different serial killers. Look at Charles Manson. And, now here's the interesting thing, and we're going to talk about Charles Manson. I studied that case very closely when it first happened. In real time, I was very interested in it and watched everything, every aspect of it. I read books on it. I got deep into this, and it was very dark. And here's the weird thing about Charles Manson. We call him a serial killer, but he didn't actually go out and kill people that much. He had other people do it for him. He manipulated people into doing it, was just as guilty. I mean, if I get you to go kill 5 people, Shanty, and I'm the reason why you did it, I'm just as guilty as you are. In that respect, crime wise, yeah. I mean, if you and I get together and rob a bank and I drive the car and you go in and rob the bank, and they catch us, we're going to both do the same time. We're both doing the crime, okay? No matter what we do in that crime. And that's what happened with Charles Manson. He was, he had his family. He thought he was God, by the way. He thought he was actually Jesus Christ walking around on earth. And he wanted to start a race war so that he could take over the world. That was his thing to do. And people in his family believed this. He had them believing that he was God. Charlie couldn't do any wrong. But take a look at Charles Manson's past, though. He was in and out of prison his whole life. He was abused by his family very badly. And then he was abused very badly in prison. Okay? And it had to twist his mind. It had to do something to him. We know that without a doubt. And that's how he came out of the process. This is what our criminal law system produced. We were actually the producers of people like Charles Manson. We got to understand that. We need to understand. And that's why we need criminal reform to a great degree, because if we don't, we may turn out more Charles Mansons in the future. If the system fails them, that's what's going to happen. We fail them as a society. And we produce these things and we let them happen. And there's open territory for the demonic. Knowing that, the demonic is sitting out there and that the demon card is on the table, we got to play it. It's a factor in this. Not every time. because the human mind can do untold evil on its own, of course. But when there's something in behind it, emboldening it, empowering it more, that makes it worse in many extents, and that's what makes that is one thing that drives serial killers. Not like that serial killer I met. I'm not going to mention the name. It was a case. It was very close to where I live. I asked the guy, I said, "How do you feel about killing 3 people?" I mean, why'd you do that? And you know what he said? His answer was, I don't really. I said it's I want. I had to do. Well, why would you think you have to unalive 3 people like that? That's interesting. To get into the mind of these, and I have had to kind of step into, especially as a writer, to understand things. You have to crawl inside of people's minds sometimes. You got to crawl in their head, try to see through their eyes, try to figure out why they're thinking that way and why they're doing the things they do. And when you crawl into the mind of a serial killer, you're in a very, very dark, dark place. It is not a happy situation. I don't advise doing it on a regular basis, okay? Because it is not only just depressing, it is very dark. Spiritually wise, it is very dark. It hurts your spirit to a certain extent. It
I,
sort of stains you spiritually, you know?
and I think, well, I agree with what Edith Gomez is saying. Yeah, generational born killers, yes, but I also think that there's a lot of. I mean, when we're looking, J.R. Sweet was one of our guests on Aquarius Rising Africa. Excuse me, and he was a trained CIA assassin. I mean, those guys are serial killers, really. Um, so you look at the mind control and stuff that these guys have gone through, and I agree. Our own government created them, released them out, MK Ultra Manchurian candidates. I honestly believe that a lot of these serial killers that have been like what I think you're talking, is it Marilyn Manson, that was also quite famous. But as far as I know, he's also been traced back into elite bloodlines in the system.
Mhm. Well, I think, like we said a few minutes ago, the government weaponizes everything. And when you start playing around with the human mind, like MK Ultra did, and some other programs I'm sure are out there, this is what the government does very well. They weaponize everything. They weaponize dolphins. They can weaponize a housefly if they want to. I mean, they do that. That's what they do. And when you start screwing around with the human mind, you're in very unknown territory. Things can go wrong. Things can go very badly that way, and they know that. And that is control over the human mind. And here's what the serial killer does. He's trying to get control. He's trying to not just get control over you or his victim or whatever the situation. He's trying to get control over life itself. He feels
Mhm.
like he is powerless in some ways. So he's going after that power. And that power of life and death over you is what he's really getting a hold of. That's what he really goes after. It's very much like, and I've taught a lot of women that have been raped. Okay, they were victims of rape. And it's not about lust. It's not about the sexual urge. It's power. It's power
Mm.
over a woman. The abuser, do use her, do whatever you want to with her. It's power that they're seeking. Okay, and this is what the serial killer does. Somebody that abuses women. Okay, I will say this to everyone today: somebody that abuses women, children, animals, they are prime targets to become serial killers. Okay, absolutely, because that's what it's about, and the government knows this. The government takes advantage of anything like that. And like I say, if you can weaponize something, if I could weaponize you into becoming a serial killer, you are a walking time bomb. I'm ready to set off whenever I want to. I can give you some code
Mm.
words or a
Mm.
situation I can put you in, whatever, and boom, set you off, do what I want you to do. You could open fire inside a restaurant, or you could go out and start slicing up people with a knife. Whatever the situation is, whatever I embed in your mind to do is that control over you. That's what MK Ultra was all about. I know that. I've studied that extensively and other programs like it. That's what it's all about, control of the human mind. And let me tell you something, when you start messing around with the human mind, and if it's got a mental illness, and a lot of these people do, and we all have our little quirks, okay? We all have our little quirks in the human mind, but they can take something that's really obvious like that, and like I said, the demonic does, they can use that to their advantage in their weaponization of you, whatever that situation is. And that's not good. You're playing around with human people here. You're playing around with lives, with people's well being, not just their mental being, but their well being as human beings. Okay. That's never good. I don't care where you're coming from with that. That is the ultimate control. And and we could do a show on that someday about why the government wants control on such a level that he wants to control absolutely everything about you, your money, what you eat, where you live, how you live. That's what it's all about, control. And what I have said before, Shanty, stands true to this day. The most addictive thing on planet Earth is not heroin, it's not meth, it's not anything. It is power, control. That's what they
Yes.
want. Yeah. And this is the serial killer on a little scale, okay, of what the government can do with things like that. You're looking at a smaller scale of that, but that's what he's out to do. Now, you take somebody like John Wayne Gacy, who was, a clown for hire. He went around to little kids' birthday parties. Can you imagine that? Could you imagine about having a clown at your grandkid's birthday party and he's a serial killer? Okay, that's not good. Okay, but think about that a minute. He was someone. A lot of people said this about John Wayne Gacy. I would have never thought he was such a nice guy. You know, or look at Ted Bundy. He was a loner. Some people say, "Oh, I believe he was." He was that. They believe that about him because he was weird. Some people can hide it, and some people can. That's what makes us- Son of Sam, he was listening to voices from the dog next door. The dog next door was talking to him, telling him to do things. Okay. Now, I'm going to
Yeah.
tell you in my book, that sounds downright demonic here, okay? They can get you to believe things like that. They can screw your mind up so
Yeah.
much you won't know what you're doing anymore. And I've actually I've seen that happen during certain investigations I've been on, certain cases I've had, where people that were with me say, they told me, I got to get out of here. I can't even think straight anymore. They were being mentally attacked by these things. And I know a man who was with me one time. We got attacked by a demonic force. It attacked me physically. It attacked him emotionally. It took him weeks to get over that. And he never really was the same after that. He didn't really even want to go out on cases anymore with that. He didn't want to mess with it. It changed him fundamentally. And when you run into things like this, that's the chance you risk of this happening. But I've actually had people come to me, Shannon. I can't think anymore. I got to leave. I got to get out of here. And I would have to take them outside and talk to them, pray with them, or whatever the situation needed to get them out of that situation. They were being mentally attacked. They confuse you. Oh, yeah, they're very good at that. And they know how to attack in, like I said earlier about their weak spot. They know where it's at, whatever it is. And like I've told a lot of people now, before I would take teams out to on a case, I would ask them, well, "How you feeling today? Are you okay? You feel all right? You're not mad at someone. You hadn't had a fight with your wife or your husband, or you're in a good mental place. You physically feel good, And if they don't, I didn't want them to go with me because they already got a weak spot that could be exploited by these forces. Oh, they're very good at that. And if you already got a weak mind, they can overcome you very well. And that's why I say they are prime candidates for possession. And they're possession. We could do a whole show on just possession level. Are so very obvious, those people are possessed. There's something definitely going on with them. but they can also be so subtle you would never guess it. You might even yourself have this problem and not even know it, spiritually speaking. That's how sneaky these things can be. That's how downright very unobtrusive they can be. There can be many levels of it. And it goes from oppression into possession, like I said earlier, with obsession. Obsession opens the door to that. Addiction opens, and what is addiction? Addiction is nothing but an obsession, okay? And even romantic entanglements can lead to this. That is an obsession unto itself. Mental problems lead to this. There's so many avenues, so many doors that they can open to come in and overwhelm you with. How can you not ignore that aspect of it with serial killers? Because it's pretty darn out. Because studies human beings, how they overwhelm human beings, how they oppress human beings. They can oppress you so much, so badly, that they open you up to possession. That's part of their plan, to battle you, to fight you, to wear you down to where they can get you. And that's why it's so very important. We need to be always watching our mental health. We need to stay. We need to know we're always in a good place, and we need to stay away from dark things as much as possible. We need to, have our mind set on good things, wholesome things, happy things. I've often said this before, and the serial killer misses this altogether. Okay, you on this in this world, no one, no thing was ever put here to make you happy. That's not what it's all about. Only you can make you happy. Okay. If you want to be happy, you'll be happy. If you don't want to be happy, you're not going to be happy. That's a big part of it. Okay. Now I know you can love other people. You can have grandchildren. You can have pets. That's okay. That's your reaction to that, though. They're not there to make you happy. They're not, nothing, nobody or no thing was put on this planet to make you happy. You make you happy. Okay, that's the way that goes. Serial killers lose this altogether. They don't know. They think, hey, I need Chantel to make me happy, or I need this to make me happy, or that. I mean, whatever. If you're the focus of their obsession, they want you. They want it. They want you so much that they will eat you to have you. I'm serious. I kid not. They will eat you. They will look at Ed Gein. Ed Gein was a really messed up situational guy. Okay, Ed Gein. We're gonna get real dark here, folks. Ed Gein was the obsession of obsessions. Okay, when his mother died, and he's very close to his mama's boy. Okay, he's very close to his mother. When his mother died, his world fell apart. He was a normal guy, worked on a farm. They had a farm. Normal guy. Oh, we think, until this happened. His world fell apart. He buried his mother. A few nights later, he dug her up and brought her back to the house, put her in a rocking chair. His mother was still with him. He didn't lose his mother that way, okay? As a matter of fact, he loved his mother so much. He was so obsessed with his mother, he was his mother, okay? So he was living, equating himself through his mother's corpse, all right?
Yeah, right.
But it didn't stop there. That was just the beginning, folks. He became obsessed with digging up dead bodies. And he would find out about these people, okay? He would do research. And we're talking about a little town here. It's not that big. It's not a great big city. We're talking about a small farming community like here. He knew these people, okay? And when they were buried, he would go unbury them. And he would bring them back to the house. But he was so obsessed with these people, he would take their skin and wear it. So if he dug up Mary Lou, he would become Mary Lou. He would wear Mary Lou. He would wear her skin. He would take the skins of people and make lampshades with them. He was obsessed with corpses and death and bringing people back. He was a resurrectionist in the worst terms, okay? He wasn't just digging up bodies to sell, he was digging them up not for profit, for pleasure. Think about this, my friends. How dark, how evil, how bad you can go here.
That's not a
Here,
human.
we don't
I
know what
mean,
he did. We don't know what he did with the rest of the body. We suspicion he probably couldn't get enough of these people bodies. He would devour them. He was a living ghoul. That's what he was. He was a living talking, but he looked like a normal guy. Everybody thought he was. Oh, Ed's a nice guy, you know. And little did they know that at night he was raiding the cemeteries and digging these bodies up and taking them back home.
that's not human behavior, though. I mean, if you think about that, when we're looking at these terrible looking monstrosity creatures that love to devour human flesh. I mean, they are never human. They might walk around in a meat suit, right? But that spirit or that soul ain't of human frequency, that's for sure. And I mean, the story again just highlights that for me because that is such a depraved you, man. Just like I can't even say enough yous to that. But to me, it just highlights these are demons or demonic creatures in human bodies that do stuff like this because no, I can't. Mm-mm.
Well, like you're very right about that. And the thing about Ed Gein, very much like Jack the Ripper we talked about. Jack the Ripper was actually definitely killing these women in a ritualistic sort of way.
Mm.
Ed Gein was not doing a ritual; he was doing it for pleasure. This is what pleased him. This is what I don't know if it had a sexual thing about it with him too. Probably he was having sex with corpses. I wouldn't doubt that a bit. This was every way that you could live a human life. He was
Well,
involved in it with corpses. Yeah, necromancy is what you call all this stuff.
yeah. Well, that's if for those of you who've been following Jesse shows, part of the rituals, some of the moon child rituals, I speak under correction. I mean, one of the what do they call it? Blasphemies that these kids have to do is to have sex with the dead, necromancy. So
Yeah.
that's part of their depraved initiation is that they have to necromancy is part of that. So you can't do something like that and then be okay afterwards. I mean, that's on another level depraved, right? So that's why I
Oh yeah.
say, how do you even think that that's a human being? Not you. I mean, I'm just speaking rhetorically. That is doing stuff like that. It's not humans.
Yeah, and you got to remember too that a lot of witchcraft, and we're talking about dark witchcraft here. Dark evil witchcraft is connected to ritualistic stuff. Okay, that's a great big part of witchcraft, the ritualistic, and the demonic knows this too, by the way, because the demonic instigates ritualism, because
Right.
this is the way. Yeah, they work in the human mind. Look at,
Mm.
and I'm not I don't want to, ruffle feathers here, but look at the Catholic Church a moment. Okay. It is very ritualistic. I hate to say that, but it is. I mean, they sit around, they chant this Hail Mary thing on them. They're doing ritualistic stuff. It's a lot about rituals, especially like the catechism and all this that they do is ritualistic. Well, this is what witchcraft is based upon in many ways. And like what Jesse would be talking about, and we need to do a show on that one day because this stuff gets very dark and very evil. Okay, when what they do with children, especially like the Red Redding or the Red Hunt or the Feast of the Wolves or the the thing I talked about that time, the Feast of the
Wild
Wolves
hunt.
and the
Yeah.
Banquet of Blood. Yeah, these things are things that they do. They incorporate into their rituals, and they get power from rituals. They get some type of a spiritual power from rituals, the demonic does. And it
Mm-hmm.
connects with them on a certain level. And I told
Yeah.
you before about the Tajern, which was a very old medieval ritual where they would actually actually put cats on a spit, living cats on a spit, and turn them over a fire and torture them to death one by one to get power from the demonic to hook up, because they would use this power, this trauma of pain and suffering to connect with the demonic. The demonic loves that. And I've told you this before about the demonic. I've had people come to me and say, "Dr. Dennis, where can I find some demons?" Okay, well, heck, go to a cemetery. That's where they hang out, or go to a mental hospital. There's definitely there because they love that trauma connection.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah, they love to. They hang out at battlefields
Please,
and
please.
sites where a lot of people have died or whatever. Yeah, they love that stuff. They are
Sorry,
all about trauma, pain, and suffering.
I want to say police. Sorry, I didn't mean police. Psych wards. They are psych wards,
Hmm.
jails, mental. Yeah, the mental health. But you'll
And
find a lot.
as a ex cop, I can tell you we dreaded Saturday night on a full moon. Okay, weird things happen when the full moon came out. But they can happen anytime, of course. But it seemed to be a higher level. Moon was full. Now, whether that just gave more people light to see by, whatever that can be a conjecture on that. I don't know if it had a spiritual connection or what, but it was really weird. You could say, well, it's a full moon. We knew what was going on then. But um, look at Ed Guy in a moment. He wants to become his victims so much. He's not feeling for them. He wants to become them to the point where he will even eat them and wear
Mm,
their skin. I mean, this is not right at all. This is very dark, spiritually speaking, kind of stuff. Because he's no longer looking at this, that's a human being that I'm skinning tonight. No, he doesn't feel that way about it. And he was very good. And that's why you got in Psycho, you got Norman Bates, is a taxidermist, by the way. Okay? Think about a taxidermist a minute. He take your beloved pet and skin it and put it on a wooden frame and put fake eyeballs in it and give it back to you. A lot of people do that. I would not want to do that to my pet, even when it died, but some people have no feeling for. Here's the weird thing about it, Shanty. Okay. To some people, a cat is just a cat, and a dog is just a dog. They don't have any emotional output towards it. You got to worry about people like that, okay? Because they can't have an emotional attachment to that. There's something going on. And this is the weird thing about people like Charles Manson and all these other guys, okay? And there are women too. I'm mentioning a woman serial killer here in a minute. Um, there's a weird thing about these guys is they are emotionally unattached. Okay, they cannot feel for you. And I've actually known young people. I've counseled a couple of them that would cut themselves. And I said, "Why do you do that? That hurts. Why do you do that?" Wait, because I want to feel something. They would say.
mhm.
Well, that's getting in a bad mental place, my friends. When you think about that, that you have to cut yourself so because you can feel something. You're becoming dead emotionally. And if you talk about being dead emotionally, you got to look at Ed Gein because he definitely was. He didn't care about those people. He wasn't just desecrating dead bodies. He had no feeling at all for these. They weren't people. They were things to him. Things that he could make a lampshade with. I remember they said that he had made ashtrays out of human skulls. You put your cigar out in your neighbor's head. My gosh, think about that. I mean, where you get to with that, the emotion's gone, and you are no longer a human being. And I have said this before, spiritually speaking, okay. And we need to do a show sometime. I did a show the other night on what I call unsigned human contracts, okay, unsigned human agreements. And there are a lot of them out there, okay. We talked about that with celebrities before and all that. That's a big thing in witchcraft and dark satanic stuff. Unsigned soul contract. Okay. Once you sign the contract, once your soul is gone, according to spiritual sources, You are no longer really a human being. Okay? You and I, Shandy, we walk down the streets of the city. We have empathy for somebody else. We have feeling for that. We love our dogs, our cats, and our children, and all these other things. We feel towards other people. But what happens when you no longer have a soul? When you no longer have that empathy, when you're no longer that, you're no longer really a human being anymore. You're not. You can't be classified. You may look like a human. You may act, walk, talk like a human. But really, what's on the inside, there's nothing left there. You're no longer a human being. Okay, there's a lot of people out there. Without a doubt, I've met a few of them. Okay, and they become so narcissistic. And this is a sickness. This is a form of demonic possession. Narcissism is. It definitely is, because that's the way the demonic does you. It gets you to turn into yourself, so that you see only what you want, and love and what you need. Nobody else matters but you. And when you get in that situation, you are definitely demonically possessed. Okay? You are exactly right where they want you. They have complete control over you, just like your government wants to. Okay? They have complete control over you. That's what it's all about. And once they that, then they can inhabit you. I'm not going to get into the deep spiritual aspects of this, but they inhabit you. They want a body to feel out of, to have emotions with, and yet they will burn that body up, spiritually speaking. They will destroy it, because their very nature is self-destructive, whatever they
Right.
do with it. And that's what happens with the serial killer. He wants to be caught. Eventually he wants you to catch him, stop him, because he knows deep down, somewhere deep down inside of him, he knows he's doing something wrong here. He's not doing the right thing. He knows he's wrong on many different levels. And there's that part of him, that narcissistic part of him, has a core to it. And he knows without a doubt that there's somewhere down deep in him that he's doing wrong. And to justify that, he would love you to catch. Jack the Ripper was that way. He wrote letters. He wanted you to catch him, but he laughed at you when you couldn't, because that was the fun part of it. That's what happened with the Zodiac killer. Oh yeah, you're talking about weird Zodiac killer. You know, that was one of the strange. I studied it extensively. Fascinating stuff. He made a cipher, by the way, that nobody has broken to this day. They say. Okay, he was brilliant. Whoever he was a brilliant person. But he just wanted to go around and shoot people for fun, and leave ciphers and little clues and laugh at them. And there was a detective that knew who he was. This man, and I don't doubt he was a brilliant guy. He was a very smart detective. He said, I know who he is. I can't prove it, though. I can't prove it. They had a partial fingerprint. And he wanted to go, now listen to this, this is weird. He wanted to trap this guy to get the fingerprint off of this guy, so we could match it up with this partial. And he said, then I would have the evidence. This ruined this detective's life. He got divorced. His children turned their back on him. This case ruined this detective's life, because he was obsessed with finding the Zodiac killer. Okay? So that's another thing you run into with serial killers. You can get re-obsessed if you're not careful. Okay? Uh, he was obsessed with finding it. He would go in. This guy worked at a hardware store. He would go in with something like, I got this part of, can you tell me if you got one? He tried every way he could think of to get this guy's fingerprints. And said every time he would go, he was either wearing gloves or somebody else would wait on him in the store, and he couldn't do it. He never could get it. It destroyed this guy's life. But he said, I know without a doubt who this guy is. He's the one that did it, but I can't prove it. How very frustrating that would be. Think about it. That's the downside of serial killers, okay? You can know who they are, but you can't prove it. That's bad. But then you got people like the BTK killer, bind and torture and kill. That was what he wanted to do. He loved torturing people. That was the one thing he wanted to do. There you go again. Control and power over somebody. That's what it all comes down to. These guys are walking around, they feel powerless. They feel like they've lost control. They have no way to. The only way they can equate with the world is through power, control over their circumstances. Now look at the female I'm going to talk about, the female serial killer. I investigated her very closely. Matter of fact, I went to the very place where they hanged her at eventually. Her name was Lavinia Fisher, the very first American female serial killer on record. Okay, and she was in a prison in Charleston, South Carolina. I investigated. You talking about a creepy looking building, boy? She definitely haunts that building, no without a doubt. Her presence does supposedly. But I actually out in the back courtyard is where they hung her on the gallows. And what she was doing, her and her husband had a inn outside of Charleston. If you went to stay in the inn, you checked in, but you never checked out. They would actually,
Hotel California.
they would kill you during the night. Yeah, they would kill you during the night and steal whatever you had, money you had on you, whatever. And they had a trap door in the floor, and they would drop you through the trap door into the marsh below where this was at. Her and her husband were quite two local characters without doubt. But when that happened, a lot of people finally caught it. And the only reason they caught it was the brother of one of the people that went missing went and stayed in that inn while he was looking for his brother. They tried to kill him one night, and they failed to do it. He got away, and they found the bodies in the marsh. They probably unalived a couple of dozen people.
Why though? What was the reason? When you say they, was it both of them or her? You said
They were
a
just robbing
female
people.
serial
They were
killer.
Well, it was more or less. I think it was kind of a hobby for them, but they were robbing people, and that's how they made their living by
Right.
getting rid of their gas. Yeah, they would actually what they would do is they would serve them some wine, and the wine had a sort of some type of narcotic in it, and it would get you to go, get you real drowsy. You go to bed. Well, I think I'm gonna turn in. I'm getting sleepy. You go to bed, and it would kind of sedate you, so they could come in and knock you in the head or whatever they would do to you, cut your throat, and drop you in the trap door after they took all what possessions you had. This went on for a long time, and they finally caught her, and she was so mean. Here's her last words before they hung her. Okay, she was a nice looking woman. There was nothing wrong about it. She was a really nice looking pictures I've supposedly seen of her. Anyway, her last words before they hung her, she was, "If you got anything you want me to tell the devil, tell me, because I'm about to go meet him."
Was that their only motivation though? Was robbery? Was there nothing more? Because it seems like a hell of a thing for a couple to murder people coming to their inn and just dump their bodies somewhere in the marsh. I mean, were they obsessed with some type of ritual type of killing? Were they doing it in a certain way? Were they targeting specific types of people? Were they, I don't know, like it's what were they doing? Were they sexually assaulting them? Was that involved?
Well, there was evidence that the Lavinia's husband did sexually assault some of the women that were murdered.
Right.
Um, yeah, they think mostly the motivation was criminal, but they were taking a very bizarre kind of pleasure out of this because they were thinking, hey, it wasn't just doing it; they were getting away with it. That
Ah,
was a big thing for
right.
them. They were, that was a big thing with them. Look what we're doing. We're so much smarter than everybody else. Look what we're doing. We're getting away with it. That is another part of serial killers where they have that, part where they're like so superior to you. I'm so smart, you don't even know who I am and what I'm doing, and I'm getting away with it. Thing. That's what was going on definitely with a Zodiac killer. Oh, he took great pleasure in that, and he would kill people on certain nights when the stars were aligned. There were different, that's why they call him the Zodiac killer. He would kill his victims under each sign of the zodiac, supposedly, when it was predominant in the sky.
Mm.
Now, the people that study the zodiac, they know that certain nights when like Leo is overhead or whatever, this is when he would kill people. And the only reason that he finally stopped, somebody he failed to kill someone, but they could never identify him because he wore a mask.
Right.
He wore a mask, and his symbol was a zodiac sign for Earth. I think was a round circle with a plus like in it. That was sort of the zodiac sign. But he was. They never caught him. But like I said, this detective knew without, and he sounded to me like he pretty well had it solved. But he could never come out in public and say it's so and so because the guy would sue him or whatever. He couldn't come out and name him. You know, but there's a man out right now that claims his grandfather was the Zodiac killer. But whether that's true or not, or just a basis to sell books, you never know. But I have to check into that. I hadn't got a chance to see what this guy is doing, but it was a fascinating case, definitely. And when you get to people like Ed Gein doing those things, and like I said, he was the North, very famous line, a guy friend of his mother, and he definitely felt that way about his mother, absolutely. But um, they say that basically, from a psychological point of view, Ed Gein was trying to defeat death. In other words, he was fighting against death. He didn't want. He didn't want. He was operating from his own fear. So he was sort of saying, "I can do this with people who died. Makes me immortal. More power over death." That's where he was coming from in some ways. They tried to analyze him on that before they executed him. And understand where he was coming from. But he had this weird obsession with this, and that's why I said this obsession definitely always opens the door to that. But
Right.
here's what we got to look at with a serial killer. Like I said at the beginning, it can be anyone. They can be you and me. All it takes is certain circumstances to do this. Certain situations that can change us fundamentally, mentally wise speaking, into doing these things and becoming
Right.
obsessed. But it is a sickness. But I'll end the show today with the very famous words of Charles Manson. And like I say, I studied this case very extensively. It is a fascinating. I would advise anyone watching today to get the book Helter Skelter. He actually did all of his work off of the Beatles songs, especially Helter Skelter. That's where he thought that the Beatles were actually talking to him through God to tell him what to do. Okay, and that's why it was called Helter Skelter. He that song, and his family played that song, and they had plans to kill a lot of famous people, a lot of famous movie stars that lived around there. I think one night that Charles sent one of his girls, and the girls would go out and prostitute themselves with Charles. That's how they got money. He would send his girls out to do things. And he sent the girls out one night right before he killed Sharon Tate and all that stuff. He sent them out, I think, to kill Doris Day's son. And I mean, he had plans to do in a lot of very famous people that he knew in that vicinity because he was operating in Hollywood. But he was very insidious in the way he carried out things. Well, we know that without a doubt, Charles Manson killed one person that we know of with a sword, and he was a black man that came and sold them drugs. And Charles disagreed with him on the price, and he took a sword out and killed this guy. And they are still supposedly finding bodies, bones every now and then out on the Spa Ranch where a lot of this took place, and out in the Death Valley where they lived for a while out in Death Valley in an old school bus out there. Uh, that bus was out there for many years. You could actually go to it and see it, which I would love to have done. But and they say there was a CM wrote in carved inside the bus. That's Charles Manson. Okay, I would love to have seen that. But anyway, they say they're kind of scared to dig out on Spa Ranch anymore. They don't know who they may dig up. Okay, but the interesting thing about Charles Manson is, like I said, he had complete control. His thing was about control, but it was control over other people in the family to get them to do. If Charlie told them to do something, they do it, no matter what. And that's why he told them, to get rid of those people in Sharon Tate's house that night, and the other people that he murdered as well. They went out on instructions to do it, and they did it. And those girls were complete followers of him to this day. One of them went on to try to assassinate the president of the United States. By the way, Squeaky Fromm, one of the Charles Manson family members, did that. So they were just like robots, human robots, with Charlie manipulating them, and that's how insidious these
Wouldn't
things
that,
can be.
but wouldn't that also speak to the fact that they were actually all bloody mind controlled? That just seems to me that this, the more I hear, obviously, stories like this, to me, and especially with the serial killers, and I've also spoken about what, in Australia, Ivan Milat, one of the guys I interviewed was actually in Derek Boy's home with Ivan Milat. And he spoke about Ivan Milat was mind controlled to make him do the stuff that he did. Now, I'm not saying they all are. I think we're definitely going to find some sickos in the world that don't need any help from the alphabet boys to be depraved. But I
Yep.
think that there certainly would be those that are sought after and probably used by the alphabet boys, right? So, this for me, do you think that this Charles Manson situation, do you think that was orchestrated, or do you think he's just naturally fucked in the head?
Well, from what I can tell, the clues that are left, like I said, a very extensive research on this. I feel like it was mostly Charles, okay, because he had this complex where he thought he was God, okay. If you think you're God, you think you can control everybody, okay. That's definitely where it's coming from. I cannot find any references to where there may have been any kind of governmental control over him. Now, it's a
Right.
possibility, yeah, but I didn't see anything that would lead me to believe that. But I wouldn't be surprised if it turned out one day to have that attribute to it,
Mm,
because he was he was not the one to be controlled, though. He was a controller. He
right.
wanted to control other people and get them to do what he wanted. That was what he was very good at. And some people have almost shanty, and it's very weird. Like Rasputin, we talked about, and like Adolf Hitler, they had almost like a supernatural power over other people to get them to do things. You and I could, talk to somebody all day long, get them to do something for us. They're not gonna do it. That's the way that goes. But these guys could do a speech or get a family or whatever they wanted to do to get to do what they wanted them to do. That is almost like a supernatural. And here's that demonic connection. If you have demonic forces working with you, it can empower you to do things like this supernaturally. And that's why I say when you get into dark areas of spirituality, like the serial killers, you definitely run into this. Okay, I'm not going to say every one of them's demonically possessed. I don't believe that. You can be evil on your own. You don't need any help most of the time. But
Right.
there's something else going on here. There's another element that you cannot ignore. It's like the 500-pound gorilla in the room. You got to talk about it sooner or later. It's there, whether you want to ignore it or not. But listen to what Charles Manson said. And it's very interesting. And I'll end today with this. When they took him out of the courtroom, he would do all kind of antics in the courtroom. He was doing all kind of things. Him and the girls in the courtroom. It was a circus. Okay, it was a circus, and that's why I said they had the thing up just now. Read the book. Definitely fascinating book if you want to get into the minds of serial killers. That's something you definitely need to read. This is what he said when they got ready to take him out. The trial was over. They were going to put him away for the rest of his life. He was very lucky. By a few months, he missed the death penalty. Okay, they outlawed the death penalty in California. So he would spend the rest of his life. And there were women wanting to marry him, too, by the way, while he was in prison, believe it or not.
Always the case, isn't
Oh,
it?
yeah.
On
He had
that
a, but, yeah, he had quite a fan club, okay? Uh,
child.
Yeah, I even wrote him one time years ago because you could actually get his autograph sell it for a lot of money. Okay, and I never got a reply back. He didn't like my letter evidently, but anyway,
You
um,
went to go.
yeah. So
Throwing yourself.
anyway, they were getting ready to take him out, and he turned back to the courtroom. He was in shackles. Turned back to the courtroom. He said something very interesting. We all need to keep in mind today. This is what he said. This is sort of his last public speech. He said, "You may lock my body up forever, but my spirit will walk your streets every night."
Mm,
That's a
absolutely.
chilling thing to think about. You know,
You see that to me again just says, when we're looking at a lot of these guys and these serious psychopaths and stuff like that, and I'm not even talking about the ones that have been mind controlled, right? I'm talking about kids that have been traumatized. You know, we go right back to what we always speak about in these kind of situations. I have no doubt if we have to look at Charles Manson's childhood, he was probably went through a lot of hell. Chances are there was a lot of abuse, maybe sexual molestation, anything like that, that would have created the trauma that opens up the body for these entities to enter these kids at a young age. And then they grow up as if this is who they are. Meanwhile, it's trauma related.
that's the interesting thing, Shanty. You know, it's like what Morticia Adams said. You know, what is normal for the spider is chaos for the fly. And they get
Exactly.
abused. Yeah, they get abused so much. People can be so abused, whether mentally or physically or both,
Exactly.
to the point where it twists you, bends you, turns you into something that you weren't at the beginning. There's definitely that aspect of it. But look at somebody like Ed Gein. Nobody did that to him. You know, he had a normal life until he decided to dig his mother up one night. You know, that we know of. You know, I don't think he was out pulling the wings off of flies and killing puppy dogs. He wasn't doing stuff like that. But look at Charles Manson. He was abused. He was used, put in prison time after time. That became normal for him.
Hmm.
Control was normal, and he had control. They had control over him most of his life. He wanted control over other people. That was what he
Yeah,
wanted. Okay,
of course.
so when you lose control, you want it back, and you don't care how you get it back. You got a problem. Okay, that's what's going on with that. So these people, a lot of times, and I've studied a lot of serial killers that we didn't even mention today. You keep looking at that. This keeps coming up. They've lost control over their lives or their emotions or what or the situations that they're in, and they want control. And this is the only way they can get control back again. You
Of
know, by
course.
controlling other people. Watch out for people like that because they are very, very dangerous.
Hmm.
Dangerous people. Yeah,
Yeah,
and you know
unhealed
that's what
wounds.
that serial killer I talked about. You know, I'll say this: I talked to his neighbors, and they said he was a normal guy. We would never believe he would do something like this. You know, but that's what you got to watch out for because that's the way they operate.
Of course, it's the way they operate. My word. Ah, it's crazy. But yeah, and Cindy is saying, or even family curse. I mean, yes, I think there's all of that. I think that leads up to it, or can the ancestral curses, stuff like that. Yeah, I do believe there's a lot of that as well. But at the end of the
Well,
day,
you know, I agree with what she said about that. If you come from a dysfunctional family,
Mm.
that could be sort of a curse. Okay, I mean, it carries on down through generations because the more dysfunctional you are, just say like a father or grandfather is abusing a child in that family, it gets passed, and then that child grows up to abuse his family, and it goes on and on. That can be very much like a generational curse, but it comes from that dysfunctionality of that family.
Yeah.
You know, yeah,
And,
that's
you
bound to
know,
happen. Yeah.
but the thing with that is as well, if we are part of that lineage, if you part of that lineage in your family, you can break that curse. That's the
Hmm.
thing. A curse is only going to go follow through if we give it a
Break
passageway.
the cycle. You can
Yeah,
break the cycle. Yeah, and I
yeah,
tell that to a lot of people, that come to me with demonology problems. I say, first of all, when you look at if you're having a demonical problem, the first thing you want to do is break the cycle.
mm,
That's
exactly,
how that's how you start getting your
exactly,
freedom from this. You break
exactly.
the cycle. And that goes with not just demonological stuff. I mean, if you got a bad habit or if there's something bad going on in your life, or whatever the situation, you got to break that cycle. You
Right,
can't keep doing
exactly.
it over. Let me tell you this, okay? And I told this to somebody the other night. This is the complete definition of ignorance. Ignorance means you don't know any better. Stupid means you know better and you still keep doing it anyway.
And
So you got
insanity
to
means
break
you
the
keep,
cycle. Yeah, you got to break the
yeah,
cycle.
insanity is when you keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over
Yeah,
again and
yeah.
expecting a different result, right? So,
Yeah. Don't
yeah,
do
no,
that. That's not good.
it's true.
Yeah, yeah.
And any dependency, any form of dependency on anything is where we start creating addictions or, and that's when we open ourselves up to all sorts of lower entities because we're depending on something
Now,
to
dependency
make it better.
dependency means something has control over you and you don't have control over it.
Exactly.
And here's the bad thing about it, Shanty. There's a lot of people trapped in marriages and relationships when one person's trying to control
Codependent.
the other one. Yeah, that's not good. It's not going to come out good. I mean, okay. Let's just say, for instance, if you and I were married, and you did 50% of the thing, and I do 50%. That's the way a marriage should be. We're together trying to do it. But when somebody is trying to control the other person in that situation, that throws the monkey wrench in the gears. That's not going to
Right.
work right because it's going to be off balance. That's not what marriage or relationship is about.
Right.
Relationships got to be 50-50, or it ain't going to work. You know.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, I certainly hope we ain't got no serial killers running around in our chats tonight, or if anyone's involved with it. But very interesting topic. And yes, like anything, I mean, wow, this just shows us again the level to which we are capable of being manipulated if we open ourselves up to
Mhm.
anything that is not kosher. Because really, think about it, one of the reasons why they love humans so much is because we are so pliable. We are able to go either way. You know, we have an amazing amount of good in us, potentially, and we have an amazing amount of potential evil, and it's up to us to choose one or the other path. So choose wisely, everybody. Right? Wow. Dennis, thank you
Yeah.
so much.
That's what I said the other day about that, human evil, the things that we can do as human beings. Sometimes the demons probably admire us. Boy, they can really do that good. So we probably, you know, we're very good at doing our own evil. We don't really need help, but help is always
Right.
there, unfortunately.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, I still like to think we will, as human beings, we invariably choose to do the right thing or the good thing. Anyway, thank you so much again for joining me, Dennis. And I look forward to seeing you back in 2 weeks' time again. So maybe you want to just tell people where they can get hold of you and what are you up to for the next few weeks? Yeah.
Okay, well, you can reach me or find me over on my channel, Hunting the Shadows YouTube podcast channel and agency. And I have shows on Monday Morning Monsters at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and Hunting the Shadows on Wednesday night at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and Paranormal Point of View on Friday nights at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I'm doing a lecture series on Saturday nights at 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time on there as well. I'll be doing actually the looking at different types of supernatural beings, talking about them, a little small lecture series I'm doing on that. And so like I said, I'm working on a book right now called Paracryptidology, Hunting Monsters and Things of Nightmare. And hope to have that out very soon. And my books are available on Barnes and Noble and Amazon. Just look up the author Dennis W. Carroll. I also have a paranormal consultation service. If you need help with the demonology or anything pertaining to the paranormal supernatural, you can contact me at my website, denniswcarroll.com.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dennis. And Olivia Cadena wants to know what's it about, this book. And I think that's probably this one she's talking about. So do you want to let Olivia know what this book's about, The Road Unseen?
Okay, let me get my readers on here. Yeah, that's the Road Unseen Paranormal. Yeah, that's available on Amazon.
What's it about?
Uh, that's my latest book. It's basically sort of kind of made it like an encyclopedia of the paranormal a little bit, and also talking about some of my cases in there as well. I hope to this book. There'll be nothing but my cases. I got a lot of people asking about those, and one of your cases on your program here that night on the Isle of the Dead, and that was very freaky. But I'm hoping I'll, in the future do a case book on that. Some of the cases that I've had some very interesting ones over the years, and some interesting experiences with supernatural entities and stuff like that that people want me to talk about. So I got to try to start working on a book on that. But that's what this book is about. It talks a little bit about cases, some of the things I've had happen, and also it kind of that people need to look for and all that. Fascinating book.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And everybody, thank you so much for joining me again. And Dennis, we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks' time. I will see you guys back tomorrow morning on Aquarius afternoon, talking about the pattern, South Africa, or from settlement to current crisis. We're talking about the architects tomorrow. And then in the evening, I'll have on with me again Leo Zagami. And on that note, I wish you all a beautiful day or a beautiful evening or a beautiful afternoon, morning, wherever in the beautiful world you are. Take good care of yourselves. And yeah,